Avery from Philadelphia and the keeper of the gong. But today we're here to talk about getting to the start of Dancer, which is everything you need to do to get to the point where you have a Hello World script. When I started trying to use Dancer, I found many pages that would tell me if you have a Hello World script, this is what you can do now to make things work. But I couldn't find anything that got me there. So this is all the parts I learned along the way.
Too small.
You're going to have to reduce the font size, right? You're going to have to.
I thought it was going to take for every page. I thought I would have to do that every time. So, what is Dancer? According to its own documentation, it is the dead simple but powerful web framework, and it uses PSGI under the hood, and it takes care of all those things we don't want to worry about anymore. And it comes from Ruby Sinatra. Oh, can I get someone to navigate for me? You'll have to Control plus, and you'll have to hit the arrows in the corner to move. One more maybe. So PSGI is that thing that's in between our framework where we're working and down at the bottom. It takes care of all the connections and what used to be done by CGI. So we don't have to anymore. Yep. And if you keep it on the upper arrow, you won't have to move the mouse as much. Yeah. So the quick start that Dancer gives us is just 4 lines. It says you need to go do this. Use curl and go out and get Dancer. Do the Dancer line there, which makes you an application. It creates the directory, puts all the modules and the templates and things in it. Go down in there, and then start Plack up, which runs it. However, it runs it on port 5000, and if you're a regular web user, you don't want to have to put in ports. You want a real URL out front. So we're going to use Nginx in place of Apache, because 2 years ago I was told that was the new hotness. So all the slides are Nginx, but you can translate to Apache if you want to, or IIS if you have to. So the goals for this talk, we're going to start from I use Ubuntu, but any Unix should follow the directions pretty close. The other operating systems, you'll have to be a tad more creative, but the steps are in the right order. We're going to install C, because if you're going to install Perl modules, sometimes you need that C part, and the C that comes with it and was used to do the Perl that was given to you, it doesn't always match. We're going to install Perl, a new modern version, Nginx in place of Apache to do the front end, and Starman, which will sit behind, sort of in between. Starman runs the thing on port 5000 as a daemon. Nginx is listening on a real domain and then forwards on to the other guy. And then we'll create the Hello World script. Along the way, you will see some code samples. The code samples have a different colored background behind each one depending on who is running the code at the time. And I have 4 users here. Some of them we don't really use in this 20-minute talk, but if you go to my website and see the extended bonus slides from last year, you see how you can install Git and Gitosis so that you don't have to use GitHub, but you have a repository to hook to. And I may make a set of those, just that set. So anything done in the first color is root. That's the one that you should try to avoid using as much as you can. There's me, who's doing the development. Mr. Prod is the guy who runs the web server and owns the production version. The other reason to have him there is so that we have a second user, because getting it from me to him is the same as getting it from me to a fellow developer in his sandbox. Once you have 2 users, you can add 3 through a million without much trouble. And Mr. Perl is going to be the one who runs Perl Brew and installs Perl so that we all use the version we want, not the version that our provider chose to give us with the distribution. Thanks. So, before we start installing all this Unix stuff, it would be good to make sure our machine is up to date. This being an Ubuntu version, it's get apt, but the other versions are very similar. So we will update and then upgrade so that everything we have is current. Next. When you do this, first we're going to get GCC and all its friends. Originally, I did this with a long list of things, and it was pointed out that Build Essentials will take care of most of it. So the first list there are the things that absolutely will be installed because it needs them, and the second longer list are the things that it's suggesting I should install. I didn't install any of them, but they're provided there so you know what you're going to need. Then I'm going to install Nginx. This one doesn't need as many things, mostly because the last batch is already done. Because we've created some users and groups and we are on a fresh machine, we're going to go ahead and create two groups, people and almost root, so that we can keep track of them. If you have your own environment already, go with what you have. You don't have to go with this group. Then I'm creating 3 users. Me and Mr. Prod, we're people, we're going to do stuff, and Mr. Pearl is almost root, but not quite. He's that middle ground. We need to put our logs somewhere. So Plack wants to put them somewhere, so it's varlog Plack up, and then each of the subdomains we're going to use, we'll have some directories for that. And I changed the permissions on these lower directories to 777. If you're worried about such things, you should change the ownership to the right person instead. If you're doing this across multiple machines, then you have to keep your persons and your users all lined up so that things will match. It may be easier to go the insecure way. It's between you and your system administrator and your maker. Same thing for Nginx, it wants some logs, so we're going to do about the same thing in about the same place. Next. And something I did not know until I started this process is that the way a lot of things know how to kill themselves properly is they know their process ID. And they know their process ID because they wrote it somewhere when I got started. So in var run, you can put something there. Now, I created a directory Plack up to put all of them in. I didn't realize at the time that every time you restart your machine, any directory inside var run goes away. So either you have to jump through a hoop somewhere to make something to make that directory come back, or don't make your PIDs in a directory, just put them straight into var run. Your choice. Root is going to want to have a few aliases. Instructions always seem to give them the C shell, the bash version. I prefer T shell from the C shell side of the family, so I give them to you both ways. Perl brew wants to put things in your home directory if you do it normally. I'm not using it the way it was designed, so we're going to put it somewhere else and put it in opt Perl brew.
Your bash alias there won't work.
Which one?
Your bash alias won't work because the back quoted thing will be interpolated into double quote at the time of the alias command.
Single quotes then?
Single quote would fix that.
I'll
But
fix
a
it.
shell function would be better.
See me later, I'll fix it. So, to do Perl brew, now we're doing this as root using the stock Perl that came on the machine. So it's cpan locallib cpan at Perl brew, and that will go ahead and install it so it can be used. Okay. We're going to make that Perl brew directory we mentioned in the alias and change the ownership to give it to Mr. Pearl in almost root. And now we're switching over to the other user. Originally I did this as root and I realized that's probably silly, so I created a guy in between. He's again going to have the directory set so he doesn't put it in his home directory. And then you need to run init to get everything set up and running. It talks about sourcing a file there. If you were doing it as a user, you do that because I'm cheating and doing something different. You don't have to worry about it. Then Perl brew available. It will tell you all the available versions. I did this days after 5.18.0 came out, so now 5.18.1 is here. You can move up. And then it's installing. You pick your version. It says it can take a while. It took me about 25 minutes, so go get something to eat. And then because I don't like to have to worry about which version I'm using, I set it to current, so it will always be the same, and you can stay consistent as you move up. Now we're going to install some Perl modules. You probably don't need DBI because you're going to use one of the sexier new ones, DBIX class or something, but DBI needs C, so this is a good way to prove that the C you've added plays nice with the Perl you've added. Then Plack, back one. Plack, Task Plack, and Starman, and then Dancer and Dancer Template Toolkit. If you were going to do Modulicious instead, this is where you make a slight diversion. Now, as a user, we're going to add the path so that our new Perl is at the front. Next. And in our home directory or wherever you do your development work, go ahead and make a directory where you can have your website show up. And go there, and now we're doing the second line of the 4 lines that they told us at the very beginning. Dancer -A, and you give a module name, and it makes a long list of files there. That list is cut down slightly from what will happen for you. It also will list the directories it's making, but I figured if you see a file, you're smart enough to realize there's a directory there. Now, we have a website. It's been created. It's working. We want to run it. So you use Plack up. If you don't do anything about a port, it'll be on 3000. I want it somewhere else, so I moved it to 18,021. If you were going to do the Modulicious version, they use Morbo instead of Plack up. Same general idea. I made some assumptions for my website, and that's because I have multiples, so the 18,000s are me, and the 16,000s are production, and then each of the websites has the same last number on the end. It tells where the domain is, where the port is, where the log files need to be, so that when you see those words on the coming slides, you know what things you need to substitute. Nginx has a directory with the available websites. We need to create this, and then there's another one, the enabled websites, which you do by symlink, which we'll do on the next slide. So here it knows the server name that it's listening to, which is second line, and towards the bottom, just off the screen, it tells which port it's being forwarded to. If you can subtract one. One smaller? Oh, or do that. So at the bottom, it's passing through the local host. Okay. So you do it in the 2 different directories, so you never have to blow them away. You can just turn them off. So here we're turning it on by making the copy on the other side and enable. Now, earlier we started Plack up from the command line as us. If we're running a real website that's not terribly useful, we'd like a daemon to do it. That's what Starman does for us. So we daemonize it, we tell it which port to listen on, give it all its logs, give its process ID, and tell it how many workers. By default, it will run 5 workers. If you're running in your own sandbox, you can probably get away with 1. If you're running on a big site, you may need more. 1?
No,
What?
it's good advice to run 2 instances, even on the development, because sometimes you have strange things going on, strange bugs you wouldn't find otherwise.
Okay, so we should run at least 2.
Yeah.
To stop the backend server, you kill the process ID, which is why we had to store it somewhere. Next. Excellent, we're right on time. So in the other slide pack, if you find it, we would extend this talk to include how to install Git and Gitosis, which sets up a repository on your machine so that you don't have to use GitHub or someplace out in the world. You can keep complete control, but you have some place to push to. And now I'm going to show you an error that hit me very viciously. And while there are many things that can go wrong for you, you should not make this mistake again. So when you install, it has a configuration file, and if you choose, you can get the YAML version, which I did. That is the way it comes to you. Now you'll notice at the bottom, start tag and end tag are these square braces. Template toolkit traditionally came the other way with angle braces, or I got that backwards. Backwards?
Well, template comes this way, so we change it to angle because that's the default instruction.
Okay, so we changed it to angle. Template toolkit started with squares. Now, if you wanted to switch back to squares, what we would need to do is make some changes with that. So we're going to turn some of this back on. Go to the next screen. Now, this is what I did. Can anybody who wasn't here last year tell me what I did wrong?
Indentation?
Yes. And if you fail to notice that you messed up the indentation, which matters in YAML, go to the next page. And don't make it any bigger. Now, that hunk of stuff shows up in your log file. And then it's written to your log file. And then it's written to your log file. Until either you notice or you have filled the disk. I have 14 domains across 3 users. I made that mistake on 2 of them. It filled my disk and I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with some files, so I decided to tarball them and take them to another machine. I couldn't tarball them because I was out of space, and that's how I figured it out. So if you go to the next slide, here it is, correctly, everything slid over the way it should be. So in YAML files, spacing matters. Don't make that mistake, and if you do, check the logs and see if your machine is getting very, very small in a hurry. Yeah?
Hopefully, well, definitely Dancer will support multiple configuration engines, so you could use like JSON instead next time, even though it's less user-friendly. YAML is user-friendly until you use it enough, and then it's not user-friendly anymore.
And I have about 1 minute left, so that's the end of the slides. Let's move on to any questions you have. None? Really?
Are the slides available?
What?
Are the slides publicly available?
They are not up, but they will be. So the conference website will link to my website. Right now you can find the slides from last year, which are slightly different, but these will be there soon. And when they show up, there will be 2 versions. There'll be the version that here, and then there's another version at the bottom will have paragraphs of words, sort of what I've been saying. But the design of the slides is that these are instructions. If you follow them, you should be able to get where you're going. And yes, I did follow the instructions from last year with the new Perl, and I shuffled things around a bit because Mr. Perl wasn't here last year. I added him for safety. I'm still making things. So we're done. You may leave, and the next person can plug in if they want, but I'll keep